Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to another StarCraft 2 video. Now, as many of you will likely be aware, yesterday I flew back home from China to the Netherlands. I was there to cast the WESG, a massive $400,000 StarCraft 2 tournament, and I was lucky enough to cast that event. Now, what I want to do today, even though I'm a little bit jet lagged, I mean the flight is like 25 hours, it's a little bit crazy, but what I want to do today is share with you one of the matches of the Grand Finals, Maru versus Dark. Now, if you haven't seen the Grand Finals just yet, I would actually recommend you watch it after watching this video, because hopefully it's going to provide you a little bit more depth as well. But it's easily one of the best series of 2018 so far, and the skill level is just getting absolutely absurd. And that's the reason why I want to show you this match right here on a backwater. We're going to be watching this game primarily through the vision right here of Dark, our Zerg player, who spawned in the top left corner of the map. Now, this is one of those games where I looked at it and I realized that I am personally simply not capable of executing this kind of style. I'm sure that many of you looked back at StarCraft 2 games as well from like 2012 and 2011, and you look at those matches and you're like, you know what? I think after practicing hard enough, I'm actually capable of executing that kind of playstyle myself as well. I mean, back in like 2011 and 2010 and 2012 in particular, we mostly just saw players sitting back, making a massive army and then clashing once, and that was pretty much the entire match. Now, this is one of those matches where it's the complete opposite. The skill level required for both players actually in order to execute their playstyles is absolutely ridiculous, and I do think it is worth pointing out. Phenomenal play when it does get sorted as well. Let me know down below in the comment section of this video what you think of this kind of setup, because I am more than interested in creating more and more content like this as well, where we just simply, admire and talk about really cool playstyles and strategies that players end up playing. Now, I'm going to speed up the game a little bit because the early game is pretty standard. We see a very quick third hatchery here for our Zerg player as well. Let me actually go ahead and take control of the camera so we don't get a headache. Now, you do see a little bit of denying right here by Maru. Just to give you a little bit of information on both of these players, Dark is widely considered to be one of the greatest players when it comes to the Zerg pieces in the world right now. I would probably put him in like top 2. Top 3 situations, and I would definitely call Maru the best Terran on the planet at this point. Maru is an absolute monster. He's getting better and better and better, and without spoiling the tournament result for you all too much, he played extremely well. Now, here's one of the things that Maru showed throughout this tournament, and no doubt in my mind, right, Dark knew about this as well. Here's one of the things that he showed. So there were a lot of late game scenarios. For example, a game that Maru played against Zerg comes to mind. There were a lot of late game scenarios where Maru was just in utter control from the very beginning of the match all the way until the very end, and he didn't really give any kind of leeway whatsoever. I mean, he showed us some insane late game Terran, and I once again highly recommend you go ahead and check out some of Maru's matches as well. He showed us some really sick late game Terran styles where he focused in particular around the Raven and then also the Ghost. And the amount of let me actually go ahead and pause here for a second, but the amount of skill required to micro those kind of armies is just absolutely insane. Now, of course, Dark knows about the fact that Maru has been showing some domination in the late game to the point where people are calling and asking Blizzard to nerf the Raven. That's the level of skill that we're talking about right here for Maru, because it seemed like it was pretty much impossible to fight against that late game style of the Terran player. Alright, so Maru decides to open up here with a bit of an aggressive push. He kills a bunch of drones. Of course, he successfully delayed this base as well. However, as you may have already noticed by that production tab, Dark is deciding to go for a big engagement. He's sending out Ravagers as well as Zerglings across the map. And this is one of those pushes that we've been seeing quite a bit out of Zerg players as well. Usually players would look at this and be like, hey, what if I go ahead and just make a Banshee? I'm going to be in a great spot to defend against this. Well, it turns out that indeed the starport was proxied on the northern end of the map, and as soon as Dark realized that, he decided to go ahead and do a bit of a push here with Ravagers and then also a lot of Zerglings. Now, with some phenomenal micro here, Maru actually manages to hold on. So we do see the Ravagers and whatnot trying to get into the main base. But this is one of the key characteristics of this game already, right? The really quick decision making here for Dark. As soon as he realized that the medevac that dropped off the Hellions spawned on the top hand side of the map, right? As soon as he realized that indeed, hey, my opponent just decided to go for a proxy, he immediately switched the button in his mind and he decided to go for a ton of roaches, ravages, and then also a whole bunch of zerglings. So this is like the first phase of the game that is mostly ended right now, and this is, you know, this is like a pretty standard response when it comes to really aggressive Zerg playstyles in the earlier matches of a tournament, right? I mean, or of like a best of 7 series. So here's the situation we are in right now, and I think this is actually absolutely critical. Maru right now is sitting on 3 bases. He's got to have 3 orbital commands, and I'm sure that every single one of you has played a game against Terran as well, where you think you are really far ahead. However, Maru, of course, has 3 mules at his disposal at any given moment, and Maru decides to put all of his eggs in one basket and go like, hey, you know what? I likely can't win the macro game if I just play straight up. Instead, I'm gonna go for another command center here and try to just simply defend. And the reason why he goes for this kind of style instead of just simply playing his like quote-unquote standard is because of the map layout. I mean, pushing into the 3rd base here is pretty tricky. So, there's this one moment where Dark decides to make the decision to let Maru have that, you know, that 4th base. And that's what kind of astounded me when I was casting these games, because like I mentioned, right, throughout the tournament we've been seeing a lot of games where Maru is just simply capable of outplaying his opponent to the point where Ravens just look stupidly imbalanced. I mean, in one of the games, for example, versus Cero, I guess I can tell you that much, he decided to go for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 nukes all at the same time. The amount of damage that he managed to do with those was absolutely insane. Now look at this, right? We see a couple of mutas flying across the map. Dark already has scouted that indeed there is a 4th command center here near the front, and he is just simply going for a really quick hive. He's got the Ultralisk Cavern, he's going for the Adrenal Glands upgrade, and he's got a couple of mutas, right? He's dealing some damage here and there, but as you may have already guessed, this is not really going to do any kind of critical damage because Maru is way too good at that, and actually even a little bit of miss micro there by Dark, it causes him to lose a few of these mutas. Now here's where I personally started getting a little bit confused while mentioning the match while this was going on live on the main stage. We see Dark securing himself another base. He decides to go for another expansion even. And he's already got 90 plus workers. Now to put that in perspective, usually we see Zerg players at this moment have about 80 or so workers, right? Usually we see Zerg players not really committing to any more than that, just because you don't have a big enough amount of supply left over to try and just simply spend on an army. I mean, Dark is close to maxing out here. He can max out on pretty much whatever army he likes, but there's no denying that nearly 100 of that supply is going to be caught up in queens and then also workers. And this is where I got a little bit worried here for our Zerg player. It turns out, though, that he knew exactly what it is he was doing, and this is what I really want to highlight here. Another command center does get constructed here near the front. Now notice Maru has decided that he's just simply going to go ahead and play really defensive here as well. There's a few roaches moving across, but for the most part, Dark is just backing off, right? And we've seen Terran players go to the late game pretty convincingly off of 4 or 5 bases. Keep in mind, Dark was extremely far ahead in the earlier stages of the game, and now he's decided to back off for a little while. Sure, he made a couple of these mutas, and they did a little bit of damage, and right now he's sending a couple of roaches here. He's cleaning up some drop play as well, but he's mostly just backing off, going for a mass amount of upgrade, and he's really just allowing this Terran player to do whatever, up to a certain point, and this is what I thought was so cool. We see Maru now taking another command center. Right? He actually goes for a couple more of these command centers right here close to the creep as well. Now that one is not going to go up just because the creep is blocking it. But Maru decides to go for another expansion here, and Dark once again does nothing. He's got a very solid bank here, so he's going to be capable of doing whatever it is he likes, but he's not doing anything. Sure, he's going for some Zerg drop shenanigans here, and that's all fine and dandy. He's now adding on a couple of Festers as well. He's going for some double upgrades. He's now doing some pushes here as well near the 5th base, but he's allowing this Terran player to have 5 bases up and running. And the thing is, Maru has been showing this late game playstyle that looks almost imbalanced off of about 5 bases with 10 gases. Now this is the first match in the series, and that's what made it even more impossible. While casting this, I was looking at it and be like, yo, I'm pretty sure that at this moment, Maru just simply, look, he's ahead in the supply count even for a second there. Maru is just simply allowed to do whatever. We've seen that late game switch come up many times. What exactly is Dark gonna try and do against this? Now here's his plan, and I have to say, I really, really like it. Dark has decided that he's just simply going to take pretty much every single base on this map. He's now going for a bit of a move forward here with the brutes, but he doesn't really commit until much later. He's just simply slow pushing forward, making sure that he's got small armies here to defend any kind of drop play and make sure that he doesn't really get caught off guard. He's scouting ahead here, but he's allowing his opponent to sit on all of these bases until we reach this moment here. So Dark has allowed 3 bases very early on. He's allowed the 4th base very early on. He's allowed the 5th base to become a planetary fortress as well. And he's even allowed additional command centers to go up. He didn't really pressure his opponent up to this point other than the massive roachling attack that we saw in the early game. This is, however, the moment where he flips the switch. He's like, you know what? I've allowed you all of these bases. You can mine off of 10 gases and go for your nuke-based style once again, and indeed, we do see those nukes coming up here. We also see the Ravens now on the production tab as well, so there's a lot of units now coming up. However, I am not gonna allow you to pick up this base over here. And this is what kind of shocked me. People have been discussing over the last couple of days, like, hey, how do you go ahead and counter this Liberator, Viking, Raven, Siege Tank, Ghost-based army composition? Because it's gonna be extremely heavy on spellcasters. Obviously, Ravens have their anti-armor missile, and while Blizzard considered nerfing it earlier already, they've decided to go against that for now. But how exactly do you counter this? And in particular, if there is $400,000 in prize money in total, right? $120,000 prize pool increase if you end up winning this best of 7 series. Dark had several moments where I felt like he was capable of winning the game. Obviously, for getting second, by the way, he was still guaranteed 80k, and for winning the finals, you get 200,000, so it's a lot of money, right? And he's just simply allowed his opponent to do whatever. Now, there's the first anti-armor missile that does get thrown out, but once again, Dark is sitting back. There's a tactical nuke now coming up here as well. It will force a couple of these units to micro back. I mean, apparently these spores will be able to live to tell that tale as well. There's a lot of bases continuously being harassed here as well for Maru. But I think the key aspect here, what makes this so very cool, is the fact that we do not see our Terran player getting another base. Dark, he's decided to just simply sit back and let his opponent take all of the bases that he likes, except when Maru decided to start looking for another expansion here at the 6th base location. So you may remember some games of StarCraft 2 a couple of years ago, right? Where we had, for example, Terran players sitting outside of the main base of the Zerg player with some siege tanks and whatnot, and they never really allowed the Zerg player to take a second base. This was something that we saw quite a bit back in like Wings of Liberty. Then a little while later, we had players, for example, trying to contain their opponent on like 2 bases, right? Making sure that your opponent only gets 2 bases up, it's fine, it's nice. That way you can go ahead and get yourself a pretty solid amount of stuff. But as long as you know that your opponent is eventually gonna mine out, you will be able to obtain the victory. However, right now we're seeing Dark allowing his opponent to sit on 5 bases. And even though this isn't necessarily a contain very much, right? I mean, we have seen players take contains with, for example, siege tanks and these really aggressive, lines of units where they just simply don't allow their opponent to move past it. Right now, even though this isn't really like a hard contain and we haven't really seen Zerg players do that very often, this is Dark saying to his opponent, you can have 5 bases, but eventually, I know, by the 30-minute mark roughly, you gotta mine it out. So we see small groups of Marines and Marauders trying to get some value, right? And Dark, I mean, he is sitting on so much economy here himself. He's got a ton of units coming up, and he decides to just simply throw away units. He just simply is sending in wave after wave of Zerg army units. And, he's trying to connect it with the Ghost. Now he gets some decent trades here, but it's all very cost inefficient, right? Dark decides to go for a bit of a move forward here as well. He decides to clean up as much as possible. But once again, right, we looked at this while casting and we're like, you know what? A lot of the Ghosts are still available. I think all of the Raven there survive with maybe 1 or 2 remaining. Maru is once again gonna attempt to take this base, but Dark says no. He's trading inefficiently, but it turns out that doesn't matter if you're mining with 80 plus workers here for a very long time already. Dark is allowing his opponent 5 bases, but the 6th one will not go up. In the meantime, though, we see Zerg just simply taking as many bases here as possible. Once again, right, it's really this area here of the map that's the main contest. I mean, this is where most of the match will be decided. Maru tries desperately once again to move a couple of units forward. He's now gone for a single Liberator over here as well. That one is going to pick up more and more kills, which is nice. Actually, it's even forcing a lot of that Zerg army all the way towards the top left-hand corner. But once again, he does not allow his opponent to get a 6th base. And even though this is technically not really the contain as you would imagine it, right? It's not like a textbook contain kind of style. Dark knows that he's mining so much more than his opponent and that eventually the bases will start running low. So while we see the skirmish here back and forth, main base has run out of resources. Natural is running extremely low. And remember that quick 3rd base that Terran took? Well, the mules, they mined that out extremely quickly. Even though we see Terran still taking their corner of the map and Dark just simply allowing that as well, Dark knows that this is effectively now a 2-base Terran with some additional mineral patches as well as some of the leftover bases. And while Maru is desperately struggling to try and get out of here, right? He's got that extremely powerful army. A couple of units get picked off here at a time, and Dark is apparently happy with that. I don't actually know exactly what his decision making here is, but it looks like as long as he's got like 10,000 or so resources here in the bank, he decides to just simply throw some units away and remake a lot more units a little while later. And this is what we will see for a little while longer. The level of play required to try and execute this and the amount of patience that you need to try and pull this off is pretty insane. It's also pretty cool because, like I mentioned, right, this is the first game of a best of 7 series. This is the way that Maru was winning a lot of games prior to this best of 7. I mean, if you show as Dark, right, that you are capable of beating that kind of style, obviously you leave that mind game as well in your opponent's head. When like, wait a second, I know that my opponent is capable of beating me if, you know, I don't get another like 6 base up, right? I know that if I'm gonna be left to my own devices, whereas previously in this tournament I was capable of just obtaining the victory with Ghosts and then a lot of Ravens as well, Dark is not gonna, you know, be really bothered by it, and instead he's just simply gonna allow me to take my bases and then eventually call it quits. Now we do see a couple of these missile turrets once again coming up, but look at the amount of economy here of Dark. He's got an insane amount of bases, and while once again he's allowing his opponent to have 5 bases, the 6th one will never actually be taken here by Dark. For like the last, I would say 15 minutes or so, we've been seeing this back and forth skirmish. And keep in mind, right, this all started off with that really aggressive push of Dark with Ravagers, Zerglings, and then also the Roaches that came in with the reinforcements, right? Now, once again, Maru right now, I mean, he's starting to feel the heat, right? I mean, look at his bases. Everything has run pretty much dry. I mean, sure, there's like 56 SCVs, but there's like, what, 6 mineral patches here in total? He needs to get some good trades out. Now, keep in mind, Maru still has a very solid amount of economy as well, and he actually does land a very nice nuke here. Maru, though, he's once again forced back just because of the amount of reinforcements. Another thing that I want to touch upon real quick is the unit composition that we see here for Dark. Dark is actually primarily focusing on Lings and Banelings and then a bunch of Hydras and whatnot as well. Sure, he made pretty much every other Zerg unit in the book as well during this match, but apparently the way to counter Ravens, Ghosts, as well as a really maxed out focused Terran army is just by simply allowing them to not take more bases and, well, maybe even mine with it of your own, I suppose. But to just not allow them to take any bases and to just keep throwing more and more units at it. This is like the most swarm-heavy game that I've seen in recent times of SC2. And while indeed, you know, you gotta keep in mind, right, this is all the result of that early game push that we saw Dark do, right, where Maru was just not left to his own devices anymore, and where Maru was not allowed to play his momentum-based playstyle. There's no denying that this is a really ballsy move to pull off. I personally would have expected Dark to go for like a second attack wave, right? As soon as you realize, hey, look at it, right? There's a 4th command center here near the front. Remember when he took that one? There wasn't really any army left over for our Terran player at that point, and I think that Dark was at a moment there where he could have decided to go for that big push and potentially obtain the victory. But it's also important to keep in mind that this one match, it's nice. You want it to end quickly if you can, but if you can play that mind game with your opponent as well, it's pretty crazy the amount of value that you can get. And even though Maru, right, he's still maxed out, he's still got a pretty solid bank here as well, he's forced into this corner of the map. What do you do right now if you're the Terran player, right? He's tried drop play, didn't really work. He's tried moving into this 6th base location, and right now he even sees a hatchery going down there. He knows there is so much army. Now, once again, Maru is gonna be forced to deal with so many units, but look at the amount of money that Dark still has. He's been sitting on 78 workers here for a little while already. He's once again just simply reinforcing this much stuff as well, and he's now also slow pushing with more and more of these spore crawlers. And you know you're getting desperate when you're using your Ghost to try and snipe down the Banelings. As Dark, he's been sitting back, for a very long time, and he's showcasing how to beat this maxed out late game Terran style by just simply containing them on 5 bases here in total. I mean, you're really not allowed to get any more. And obviously there's more command centers and whatnot, and Maru, he's used to playing that momentum-based style. The reason why we saw Maru win a lot of games in this tournament was because of the momentum. Essentially, he grabs like a small lead in the early game, and Maru just doesn't stop pushing. He just drops at 3-4 places at once, and it's honestly some of the most impressive Terran play I've ever seen. But in this particular match, he was forced back on his own side of the map, and Dark was alright. You know, Dark was like, alright, you can do whatever you want. You can sit on those bases if you like, but at some point I'm gonna hold you back and you get like, you know, you get grounded. You're no longer allowed to take any more expansions. And I personally was very surprised when it turns out that apparently our Terran player here was allowed to take 5 bases. Now look at this fight here coming up next. The amount of army still available here for Maru is absolutely insane. Right, we see some great Hunter-Seeker missiles, or I guess anti-armor missiles coming up. They're gonna get rid of actually a lot of this Zerg army, and this is the reason why Zerg players look at this and be like, hey, you know what? I don't think I can actually beat this. The thing is, look at Dark's bank. He's gonna be able to remax with whatever he likes, and there's 20 plus corruptors immediately coming in. Now, interestingly enough, actually, I was getting a little bit worried here for Dark for just a little bit, because there's no denying, right? All of a sudden, Terran still has a lot of these units left over. He's still got some energy left over in these Raven as well, so he's actually not in a terrible spot. But Dark is just simply flooding the map with more and more units. And even though Dark, right, he was mining practically every base on this map, he's now also running dry on minerals. Right? Every single base here is essentially running dry on minerals here already, except for the contest here at the 6th base. And eventually, after an extremely well-fought battle, Dark obtains the victory. Now, if you guys are interested, I am more than willing to make a video similar to this one to showcase what Maru's playstyle was like in this tournament. If you are interested, let me know down below in the comment section, because there is some insane drop-based play that he managed to pull off as well. And you know, he's microing 3, 4, 5 different angles at once and then shoving with his main army, all the while mass expanding. It's a completely different side of Maru than we see in this match. But even though this is pretty much the nerdiest of kind of videos I can upload, I'm very curious to see how many of you are interested to see more of this game analysis focused video content. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you guys again in the next one.